Chike's hands trembled as he gripped the steering wheel of his Toyota Camry, navigating through the congested streets of Lagos. The traffic crawled forward in fits and starts, a cacophony of honking horns and shouting vendors filling the humid afternoon air. He had moved to the city 3 years ago, leaving behind his village of Umuahia after Adanna's death, hoping the anonymity of urban life would help him forget. But grief followed him like a shadow, persistent and unshakable. His phone buzzed on the passenger seat, another message from his mother asking when he would remarry. Chike ignored it, focusing instead on the road ahead. He needed to pick up supplies from Balagun Market before evening fell. The market was a labyrinth of corrugated iron stalls and concrete shops, where anything from imported electronics to traditional fabrics could be found. It was chaotic, overwhelming, and exactly the kind of distraction he needed. Parking was impossible near the market entrance, so Chike left his car 3 blocks away and walked through the crowded streets. The air smelled of roasted plantains, exhaust fumes, and the sharp tang of fresh fish. Traders called out their wares in Yoruba, Igbo, and Pidgin English, their voices blending into a familiar urban symphony. Despite living here for years, Chike still felt like an outsider, a village man lost in the big city's endless noise. He was examining a display of phone chargers when he saw her. Adanna stood 30 feet away, her profile unmistakable even in the throng of shoppers. She wore a blue Ankara wrapper and matching headscarf, the exact style she had favored in life. Her movements were fluid and natural as she haggled with a fabric seller, gesturing expressively with hands that Chike had held 1,000 times. His heart stopped, then hammered against his ribs like a caged bird desperate for freedom. It couldn't be her. Adanna had died 4 years ago from complications during childbirth. He had identified her body at the hospital, attended her funeral, and helped lower her coffin into the red earth of their village cemetery. He had mourned her until mourning became his entire existence, until his family insisted he leave Umuahia to start fresh in Lagos. Yet there she stood, alive and vibrant, laughing at something the vendor said. Chike's legs moved without conscious thought, carrying him through the crowd. People cursed as he pushed past them, but he barely heard their complaints. His vision tunneled, focused entirely on the woman who couldn't possibly be his wife. She turned slightly, and he caught a glimpse of her face, the same delicate nose, the same full lips, the same beauty mark above her left eyebrow. Adanna, his voice cracked as he called her name. She didn't respond, continuing her negotiation with the vendor. Chike moved closer, his breath coming in short gasps. The market sounds faded to a distant hum. Nothing existed except this impossibility, this miracle or nightmare unfolding before him. When he was close enough to touch her, Chike reached out and grabbed her arm. The contact sent an electric shock through his body. Her skin was warm and solid, undeniably real. She spun around with a startled cry, her eyes wide with alarm. "What are you doing? Let me go," she snapped, trying to pull away. Up close, the resemblance was even more striking. Every feature matched his memories perfectly. But something was different in her eyes, a hardness he didn't recognize, a wariness that Adanna had never possessed. "Adanna, it's me. It's Chike, your husband." His voice broke on the last word. The woman's expression shifted from alarm to confusion, then to something like pity. "I don't know any Chike. My name is Ngozi. You've got the wrong person." She yanked her arm free and stepped back, attracting the attention of nearby shoppers. No, you don't understand." Chike reached for her again, desperation making him bold. "I buried you, but you're here, you're alive. How is this possible?" A small crowd began to gather, sensing drama. The fabric vendor shouted for security. Ngozi's face hardened and she raised her voice. "I said I don't know you. Someone help me. This man is harassing me." 2 market security guards pushed through the crowd, their faces stern. Chike barely noticed them, his attention fixed on the woman who wore his dead wife's face. His mind raced with impossible explanations. Had Adanna somehow survived? Was this a twin he never knew existed? Or had grief finally driven him to madness? One of the guards grabbed his shoulder. "Oga, you day craze. Leave this woman alone before we carry you go station." Chike allowed himself to be pulled back, but he couldn't look away from Ngozi. She clutched her shopping bags close, her body language radiating fear and anger. But beneath that, he saw something else, a flicker of recognition that vanished as quickly as it appeared. "I'm sorry," Chike stammered, though he wasn't sure what he was apologizing for. You look exactly like someone I lost." Ngozi's expression softened slightly. "Many people have doubles in this world. I'm sorry for your loss, but I'm not who you think I am." She turned and disappeared into the crowd, leaving Chike standing frozen among curious onlookers. The guards released him with a warning, and gradually the crowd dispersed. Chike stood alone in the middle of the busy market, his heart still racing, his mind refusing to accept what had just happened. He had touched her. She was real, but she claimed to be someone else entirely. As he walked back to his car in a daze, one thought consumed him. He had to find her again. Whether she was Adanna returned from the dead, an identical twin, or evidence of his deteriorating sanity, he needed answers. The ghost he thought he'd buried had suddenly walked back into his life, and nothing would ever be the same. What will Chike do next? Will he find Ngozi again, or was this encounter just a cruel trick of fate? Click on subscribe button and discover the shocking truth. Sleep eluded Chike that night. He lay in his small one-bedroom apartment in Surrey, staring at the ceiling fan's lazy rotations, his mind replaying the market encounter in an endless loop. The woman's face, her voice, even the way she moved, everything matched his memories of Adanna. Yet she had looked at him like a stranger, with fear rather than recognition in her eyes. By dawn, exhaustion had given way to determination. Chike called his supervisor at the construction company where he worked as a site engineer and claimed illness. Then he dressed quickly, grabbed his wallet and phone, and headed back to Balagun Market. If this Ngozi was a regular customer, someone would know her. The market looked different in the morning light, less chaotic, but already bustling with early shoppers and vendors setting up their stalls. Chike made his way to the fabric section where he'd seen her yesterday, his heart pounding with a mixture of hope and dread. The same vendor was arranging colorful Ankara prints on display racks, her movements practiced and efficient. "Good morning, madam," Chike greeted her in Yoruba, keeping his voice respectful and calm. "I was here yesterday and I had a misunderstanding with a customer, a woman named Ngozi. I'd like to apologize to her properly. Do you know where I can find her?" The vendor eyed him suspiciously. "You're that man who grabbed her. She was very upset. Why should I tell you anything?" Chike pulled out his wallet and extracted several crisp 1,000 naira notes. "Please, madam, I mean her no harm. She looks exactly like my late wife. It shocked me. I only want to apologize and understand how this is possible." The money changed hands, and the vendor's expression softened. "Ngozi comes here every Wednesday and Saturday to buy fabrics for her boutique. She runs a shop in Aikja near the computer village. I don't know the exact address, but ask around there. People know her place. It's called Ada's Fashion House." Chike thanked her profusely and immediately caught a Danfo bus heading toward Aikja. The journey took nearly 2 hours through Lagos's notorious traffic, giving him too much time to think. What would he say to Ngozi when he found her? How could he make her understand without seeming like a madman or a stalker? Computer Village was a sprawling technology market, but the surrounding area housed numerous boutiques and small businesses. Chike spent the next 3 hours walking from shop to shop, asking vendors if they knew Ada's Fashion House. Most shook their heads or gave vague directions that led nowhere. He was beginning to lose hope when a young woman selling handbags pointed down a narrow side street. "Third building on the left, second floor. You can't miss the sign." The building was weathered but respectable, with multiple small businesses sharing the space. Chike climbed the concrete stairs, his legs heavy with apprehension. A hand-painted sign reading Ada's Fashion House hung above a doorway, and through the glass, he could see racks of clothing and a small counter. He pushed the door open, triggering a cheerful bell. The shop was empty except for a young girl of about 16 arranging dresses on hangers. She looked up with a professional smile that faltered when she saw his face. "Good afternoon, sir. How can I help you?" "Is Ngozi here, the owner?" The girl's eyes widened slightly. Madam went out to make deliveries. She'll be back soon. Would you like to wait? Chike nodded and settled onto a wooden bench near the window. His nerves stretched taut. The shop smelled of new fabric and lavender air freshener. Fashion magazines lay scattered on a small table, and framed photos decorated the walls, images of satisfied customers modeling various outfits, but none of Ngozi herself. 20 minutes passed before he heard footsteps on the stairs. The door opened, and Ngozi entered carrying several plastic bags. She froze when she saw Chike, her expression cycling rapidly through surprise, fear, and anger. "You," she breathed. "How did you find me? Blessing, go to the back room." The young assistant scurried away, sensing tension. Ngozi set down her bags slowly, her body language defensive. "I could call the police. This is harassment." Chike raised his hands in surrender. "Please, just give me 5 minutes to explain. Then I'll leave if you want me to." She crossed her arms but didn't reach for her phone. "Talk, quickly." He told her everything. About Adanna, their life together in Umuahia, the pregnancy that should have brought joy but brought death instead, the funeral, the years of grief. He spoke of moving to Lagos to escape the memories, only to see his wife's face in a crowded market. His voice cracked with emotion, and by the end, tears streamed down his face. Ngozi listened without interrupting, her expression unreadable. When he finished, silence filled the shop, broken only by the distant sounds of Lagos traffic. "I'm not your wife," she said finally, her voice softer than before. "My name is Ngozi Okafor. I was born and raised in Lagos. I've never been to Umuahia, never been married, never been pregnant. You have to accept that sometimes people just look alike." "But it's not just the looks," Chike insisted. "Everything about you, your mannerisms, your voice, even the way you held those fabrics yesterday. It's exactly like her." Ngozi's jaw tightened. "Coincidence, nothing more. Now please leave. I'm sorry for your loss, truly I am, but I can't help you with your grief." Chike stood slowly, defeated but not convinced. As he moved toward the door, something caught his eye, a small scar on Ngozi's left wrist, partially hidden by her bracelet. Adanna had an identical scar from a childhood accident involving a cooking pot. The chances of such a specific marking being coincidental seemed astronomical. "Your wrist," he said quietly. "How did you get that scar?" Ngozi's hand flew to cover it, her eyes widening with what looked like panic. "That's none of your business. Get out, now." But Chike had seen her reaction, and it told him everything he needed to know. This woman wasn't just a lookalike. She was connected to Adanna somehow, whether she admitted it or not, and he was going to discover the truth, no matter what it took. Chike couldn't let it go. Back in his apartment that evening, he pulled out an old photo album he'd brought from Umuahia, one of the few possessions that survived his desperate purge of painful memories. He flipped through images of Adanna, at their wedding, visiting his family's compound, standing in front of the village church. In one photo, she held her left wrist toward the camera, showing off a new bracelet. The scar was clearly visible, a small curved line that looked exactly like the mark on Ngozi's wrist. He grabbed his phone and called his mother in Umuahia. She answered on the third ring, her voice warm with surprise. "Chike, my son, are you finally ready to come home for a visit?" "Mama, I need to ask you something about Adanna. Did she have any siblings? A twin maybe, or a sister she never mentioned." His mother's silence stretched uncomfortably long. When she finally spoke, her voice had changed, becoming cautious. "Why are you asking about this now? It's been 4 years." "Please, Mama, it's important." Another pause, then a heavy sigh. Adanna did have a twin sister. They were separated when they were very young, maybe 5 or 6 years old. There was some trouble in the family. Their father lost his land in a dispute, became involved with bad people. The mother took Adanna and fled to our village, but the twins stayed with an aunt in Lagos. Adanna never spoke about it. It caused her great pain. Chike's hands shook so badly, he nearly dropped the phone. "Why didn't anyone tell me this?" "Adanna made us promise not to mention it. She said her sister was dead to her, that the separation had destroyed any bond between them. We respected her wishes. After Adanna died, what would have been the point of telling you? It would only have added to your grief. After ending the call, Chike sat in darkness, his mind racing. Ngozi wasn't Adanna returned from the dead. She was Adanna's twin sister, the one his wife had never wanted to discuss. But why had Ngozi pretended not to recognize Adanna's name? Why the fear in her eyes when he mentioned the scar? The next morning, Chike returned to Ada's fashion house. This time, he came prepared with the photo album and a determination to get answers. Ngozi's assistant informed him that her boss wasn't in, but Chike settled onto the bench and announced he would wait as long as necessary. 3 hours passed. Customers came and went, casting curious glances at the determined man camped in the corner. Finally, just after noon, Ngozi appeared. Her face hardened when she saw him. "I told you not to come back." Chike stood and pulled out a photograph, holding it toward her. "This is Adanna, my wife, your twin sister." Ngozi's carefully maintained composure cracked. She stared at the photo, her hand rising unconsciously to her mouth. Who told you?" "My mother. She explained that you and Adanna were separated as children. Why didn't you tell me yesterday? Why pretend you didn't know her?" Ngozi's eyes glistened with unshed tears. She grabbed Chike's arm and pulled him out of the shop, down the stairs, and into a small restaurant on the ground floor. They sat at a corner table, away from other customers. "I haven't seen my sister in over 30 years, Ngozi said quietly, her voice thick with emotion. "We were torn apart when our family fell into poverty. Our mother took Adanna and disappeared. I grew up believing I'd never see her again. I searched for her when I got older, but I could never find any trace. Then, about 5 years ago, I heard rumors from someone who'd visited Umuahia. A woman there had died in childbirth, and the description matched what I imagined my sister might look like." She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "I wanted to go to Umuahia to find out if it was really her, but I was afraid. Afraid of confirming that I'd spent my whole life searching for someone who was already dead. Afraid of opening old wounds. So I did nothing, and I've lived with that cowardice every day since." Chike felt his anger dissolving, replaced by a profound sadness. "When I grabbed you in the market, you must have been terrified." "I was, but I also saw your pain. It was like looking in a mirror. We both lost Adanna, just in different ways." "Why did you deny knowing her name?" Ngozi looked down at her hands. "Because acknowledging it would make it real. As long as I pretended that woman who died wasn't my sister, I could still imagine that Adanna was out there somewhere, living a good life. Foolish, I know." They sat in silence for a long moment, two people bound by love for the same woman, processing decades of separation and loss. Finally, Chike pulled out more photographs from the album. "Would you like to see what her life was like? She was happy, at least until the end." Ngozi nodded, and they spent the next hour going through the photos. Chike told stories about Adanna's love of cooking, her terrible singing voice, her dream of opening a school in Umuahia. Ngozi laughed and cried, seeing glimpses of the sister she'd lost so long ago. "She looks so much like our mother did," Ngozi whispered, touching a photo tenderly. "Same smile, same way of holding her head when she laughed." "You have the same smile too," Chike observed. As afternoon faded toward evening, they exchanged phone numbers and made plans to meet again. Ngozi wanted to visit Umuahia to see where her sister had lived and was buried. Chike offered to take her, to introduce her to Adanna's mother, their mother, who had no idea her other daughter was alive and searching. Walking back to catch a bus home, Chike felt something shift inside him. The grief that had defined his existence for 4 years was still there, but it had transformed into something different, a connection to someone who understood loss in a way no one else could. He had found Adanna's ghost in the market, but he discovered something more valuable. Family he never knew existed, and perhaps, eventually, a path toward healing. What will happen when Ngozi meets the mother who abandoned her? Will the family reunion bring peace or more pain? Continue watching and comment where you are watching from. 2 weeks later, Chike and Ngozi sat side by side in his Toyota Camry, heading east on the Lagos Benin Expressway toward Umuahia. The journey would take at least 6 hours, maybe more with traffic and the notorious police checkpoints that dotted the route. Ngozi stared out the window, watching the urban sprawl of Lagos gradually give way to smaller towns and eventually the lush green countryside of southeastern Nigeria. "I haven't left Lagos in 5 years," she said quietly. "I convinced myself that everything I needed was in the city, but really, I was just afraid of facing the past." Chike navigated around a pothole the size of a small crater. "The past has a way of finding us whether we face it or not. I tried to run from my memories of Adanna by moving to Lagos. Instead, I found you." They had spoken on the phone almost daily since their emotional meeting at the restaurant. Ngozi had told him about her life, how their aunt had raised her in a crowded Lagos compound, how she'd worked multiple jobs to put herself through fashion school, how she'd built her boutique from nothing. She'd never married, never had children, pouring all her energy into her business and the search for the sister who'd vanished from her life. Chike, in turn, had prepared Adanna's mother for the shock of learning her other daughter was alive. The old woman had wept for an hour, then insisted they bring Ngozi home immediately. She'd been cleaning and cooking for days, preparing the compound for a reunion she'd never dared to dream about. As they passed through Benin City, stopping for fuel and roasted corn from a roadside vendor, Ngozi's nervousness became more apparent. Her hands trembled as she peeled the corn, and she barely ate a quarter of it before wrapping the rest in paper. "What if she hates me?" Ngozi asked suddenly. "What if she blames me for not trying harder to find them?" "She doesn't," Chike assured her. "When I told her about you, all she felt was joy and guilt, terrible guilt about leaving you behind all those years ago." "But why did she leave me? I've never understood that. Why take one daughter and not both?" Chike had asked his mother the same question. "She told me it wasn't a choice she wanted to make. Your father had become dangerous, drinking heavily, involved with criminals who were demanding money he didn't have. Your mother planned to take both of you and run, but your father found out. There was a violent confrontation. She managed to escape with Adanna, but you were staying at your aunt's house that night. By the time she could think about going back, your father had threatened to kill all of you if she returned. She spent years trying to find a way to get you back, but eventually she had to accept that keeping Adanna safe meant staying hidden." Tears rolled down Ngozi's cheeks. "All this time I thought she just didn't want me, that I wasn't good enough, wasn't loved enough." "You were loved, are loved. Adanna used to cry about you, my mother told me. She begged to go back to Lagos and find you, but your mother was too afraid. By the time you were old enough that the danger might have passed, so much time had gone by that they didn't know how to bridge the gap." They drove in silence for a while, the weight of decades of misunderstanding and pain filling the small car. As they entered Abbey Estate, the landscape became more familiar to Chike. Red earth roads branching off from the main highway, clusters of painted houses with zinc roofs, small markets where women sold vegetables under colorful umbrellas. "Tell me about the village," Ngozi said, trying to distract herself. "What's it like?" Chike smiled, remembering. "Peaceful, mostly. Everyone knows everyone, which can be good and bad. The market on Eek Day is the center of social life. There's a stream where the children swim, palm trees everywhere, and on clear nights you can see more stars than you ever will in Lagos. Adanna loved it there, though she sometimes missed city life." Did she suffer at the end?" Chike's hands tightened on the steering wheel. "The pregnancy was difficult. She was having complications, and the village clinic wasn't equipped to handle them. I wanted to take her to the city hospital, but she insisted on staying close to home. When things went wrong, it happened so fast. By the time we got her to Umuahia General Hospital, it was too late. The baby, our son, died too." "I'm so sorry," Ngozi whispered. "For all of it." They reached Umuahia as afternoon shadows lengthened across the town. Chike drove through the main streets, then turned onto a dirt road that led to the family compound. It was a modest collection of buildings arranged around a central courtyard, the main house where Adanna's mother lived, several smaller structures for extended family, a kitchen house with smoke drifting from its roof, and a small shrine to the ancestors. As the car pulled up, people emerged from the buildings. Word had spread through the village that Adanna's twin sister was coming home, and dozens of relatives and neighbors had gathered to witness the reunion. But Chike's eyes went immediately to the old woman standing at the center of the crowd, her hands clasped to her chest, tears already streaming down her weathered face. Ngozi stepped out of the car slowly, her legs shaky after the long journey. For a moment, she and her mother simply stared at each other across the dusty courtyard. Then the old woman moved, rushing forward with surprising speed, and pulled Ngozi into her arms. "My daughter," she sobbed in Igbo. "My lost daughter, you came home." Ngozi collapsed against her mother, 3 decades of abandonment and longing pouring out in broken cries. The crowd pressed closer, everyone wanting to touch this ghost from the past. This miracle returned to them. Several older women began singing a traditional welcome song, their voices rising into the evening air. Chike hung back, giving them space for their reunion. He felt a hand on his shoulder and turned to find his own mother standing beside him, tears in her eyes. "You did a good thing," she said, bringing them back together. "Adanna would have wanted this," he replied. As the celebration continued, with food being brought out and more relatives arriving, Chike watched Ngozi being led into the compound, surrounded by family she'd never known she had. She looked back at him once, her face transformed by joy and relief, and mouthed the words, "Thank you." The ghost he'd grabbed in the market had become real, but not in the way he'd imagined. He hadn't gotten his wife back, but he'd restored a family torn apart by tragedy and time. And somehow, that felt like enough. The next morning dawned cool and misty, the kind of weather that made Umuahia feel timeless, caught between the ancient past and the uncertain present. Chike woke early in the small room he always used when visiting the compound, listening to the sounds of the household stirring, chickens clucking in the yard, someone sweeping the courtyard, the low murmur of women's voices preparing breakfast. Ngozi had insisted on visiting Adanna's grave. "I need to see her," she'd said the night before, after the celebration had finally wound down and most of the visitors had returned to their homes. "I need to say goodbye to the sister I lost without ever knowing I'd lost her." Now, as the sun burned away the morning mist, a small group made their way to the village cemetery. Chike led the way, followed by Ngozi, their mother, and Chike's mother, who'd become a close confidant to Adanna during her time in Umuahia. Several other family members trailed behind, maintaining a respectful distance. The cemetery sat on a hillside overlooking the village, a peaceful plot of land shaded by ancient Iroko trees. Simple concrete markers and wooden crosses identified most graves, though some of the older ones had been reclaimed by the earth, their occupants remembered only in stories and prayers. Chike had visited Adanna's grave countless times in the year following her death, but he hadn't been back since moving to Lagos. As they approached the site, his heart began to pound. He'd maintained the grave meticulously during that first year, keeping the marker clean, the area weeded, ensuring flowers always decorated the spot. But 3 years of absence would have taken their toll. He stopped abruptly 10 feet from where the grave should have been, confusion flooding through him. The area looked different, too neat, too well-maintained. Fresh flowers lay against a marker that gleamed white in the morning sun, and the grass around it had been recently trimmed. "Someone's been taking care of it," his mother said quietly, noticing the same thing. "But who? You've been in Lagos, and we thought you wanted to leave the past alone." Ngozi moved forward slowly, kneeling beside the grave. The marker read, "Adanna Akafarenwasu, beloved wife and mother, taken too soon." Below the inscription, someone had recently added a small wooden plaque that read, "And beloved sister, never forgotten." "I don't understand," Chike said, his voice shaking. "I didn't put that there." An elderly man standing at the edge of their group cleared his throat. Chike recognized him as Akaro, the groundskeeper who maintained the cemetery and prepared graves for burials. The old man's weathered face was troubled. "Oga Chike, I need to confess something. For the past 2 years, a young woman has been coming here every month to care for this grave. She pays me well to ensure it stays beautiful, and she brings fresh flowers every visit. She comes quietly, early in the morning before most people are awake, and she never stays long. Chike felt the world tilt beneath his feet. What woman? Who is she? Akoro shook his head. She never told me her name, but she said she was family, that she'd lost someone precious and failed them when they were alive. She begged me to keep it secret, said she wasn't ready to face the other family members yet, that her guilt was too heavy. Ngozi had gone very still, her hand pressed against Adanna's marker. When she spoke, her voice was barely a whisper. When did she first come? Was it about 2 years ago, maybe a little more? Yes, Akoro confirmed. Maybe 2 years and 3 months. I remember because it was just after the rainy season ended. Ngozi turned to face them, tears streaming down her face. It was me. I've been coming here since I finally gathered the courage to find out if the woman who died in Umuahia was really my sister. When I confirmed it was Adanna, I couldn't bring myself to meet the family. I was too ashamed that I'd never searched hard enough while she was alive. But I could care for her grave, ensure she wasn't forgotten. It was the only way I knew to show my love. Chike felt as if his legs might give out. You've been coming here all this time. We passed each other in Lagos. We shared a city for years, and you were also coming here. I was too afraid, Ngozi sobbed. Afraid of judgment, afraid of being rejected by a family that might blame me for abandoning my sister. So I came in secret, paid Akoro to maintain the grave between my visits, and told myself it was enough. But it never was. I always felt incomplete, like I was still hiding from the truth. Their mother moved forward and wrapped her arms around Ngozi, holding her as she wept. My daughter, there is nothing to forgive. You were a child when we were separated. The fault was never yours, it was mine, for not finding a way to keep you both, and your father's, for creating a situation that forced such terrible choices. Chike knelt beside the grave, running his fingers over the wooden plaque Ngozi had added. All this time, while he'd been drowning in grief in Lagos, someone else had been silently mourning the same person, maintaining a connection to a sister she'd barely known. The universe had brought them together not through coincidence, but through shared loss and love. Adanna would be happy, he said finally. She spent so much of her life missing you, wondering if you were alive and well. Knowing that you've been here, caring for her even in death, she would find peace in that. Ngozi wiped her eyes and took Chike's hand. I want to tell you about something I found in her grave records at the church. The priest showed me when I first came asking questions. Did you know she'd left instructions? If anything happened to her during childbirth, she wanted to be buried holding a letter. She wrote it on the day she went into labor, as if she sensed something might go wrong. Chike's throat tightened. What did it say? The priest wouldn't show me. He said it was for family only, but he mentioned it was addressed to someone named my sister. At the time, no one understood what she meant because no one knew she had a sister. Now we know. That letter was for me. The group stood in stunned silence, processing this revelation. Adanna had spent her final hours thinking of the twin she'd lost, trying to reach across decades of silence with a message that might never be received. We could exhume, someone started to suggest, but Ngozi shook her head firmly. No, let her rest. The fact that she thought of me at the end, that she tried to tell me something, that's enough. I can live with that. As the morning sun climbed higher, the group slowly made their way back to the compound. But Chike and Ngozi remained at the grave a little longer, two people brought together by loss, bound by a woman who'd loved them both in different ways. What will you do now? Chike asked. Will you stay in Lagos or come back here? Ngozi considered. I'll keep my business in Lagos, it's my life's work, but I'll visit more often. This is where my roots are, where my sister rests. I need both places to feel whole. And your mother, our mother, she'll want to see you regularly. I know, we have years to make up for. Ngozi paused, then added quietly, what about you, Chike? You found me because you were looking for Adanna, but she's gone. What happens when you accept that? Chike looked at the grave marker, at the evidence of Ngozi's secret devotion, at the village spread out below them in the morning light. I think I've been accepting it gradually, without realizing. Finding you didn't bring Adanna back, but it gave me something I'd lost. Purpose, connection, maybe even hope. We're family now, whether we planned it or not. That has to count for something. They walked back together, and as they reached the compound gates, The smell of cooking food and the sound of laughter greeted them. Life continued, as it always did, carrying both grief and joy in equal measure. Chike understood now that he hadn't grabbed a ghost in the market that day. He'd found a living, breathing person who carried his wife's face but possessed her own story, her own pain, her own strength. And in discovering Ngozi's truth, he'd stumbled upon his own path forward, not forgetting Adanna, but honoring her memory by embracing the family connection she'd always longed for. The market encounter that had shocked him, terrified Ngozi, and confused everyone who witnessed it had ultimately brought healing to a fractured family. Sometimes, Chike thought, the universe works in mysterious ways, guiding us toward exactly what we need, even when we don't know we need it. Did this story move you? The power of family, forgiveness, and second chances can transform lives in ways we never imagine. Share this story with someone who needs to hear that it's never too late to reconnect with lost family members or to find healing after loss. Have you experienced a shocking reunion or discovered a family secret that changed your life? Share your story in the comments below. Your experience might inspire someone else to seek the connections they thought were lost forever. Remember, the people we think are gone might be closer than we imagine, and the courage to face the past can open doors to an unexpected future.